When you talk about bumping a player, it's pretty much
great courage. One that says the bump is dead. That's how you deliver it.
What is going on, YouTube universe? My name is Trent and welcome to the Hip and Shoulder, where we discuss everything Australian rules football. And today we're focusing our attention on round 15 and unpacking everything that went down that round, albeit a week later, with the Round Recap podcast. If you are new to this corner of YouTube and you've never seen this podcast series before, essentially we sit down after that round of football and unpack all the action from the first game of the round to the last game of the round. And I slacked a little bit and we fell behind with round 14, and I've kind of fallen behind with round 15. So today we're covering 2 weeks ago, and then in a couple of days' time I will drop the Round Recap podcast for round 16, which will cover the action that just went down this past weekend. Both weekends absolutely jam-packed with some great football. So over the span of the next 2 episodes, definitely you're going to want to strap yourselves in and check it out. So if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, get on board the community we are building. But that being said, it is time to dive on in, and round 15 kicked off with Carlton hosting Geelong at the MCG in a game that I was very excited to check out, because Geelong have been on the down and we are expecting in some way, shape or form for Geelong to bounce back. This is a team that started the year off undefeated, and a lot of people were asking questions of how long they could maintain that, where their next loss was going to come from. And idiots kind of like myself even went as far as saying surely with the start they have had, they do not miss the top 4. They are still now in the mix to miss the top 8 completely, which is a huge shake-up from where they were at. It's very hard to kind of get your head around that fact. And then we've got Carlton, who have continued to just be this dominant presence and find a way to not just dig deep, but dig deep in emphatic ways and get big margins on the board. This game, 21 goals 12 against 11 goals 19, a 10-goal win in the end for Carlton in a game that was probably over at three-quarter time. But we know Geelong aren't just going to lie down and take a hiding. We know Geelong are notorious for kind of staying in the hunt and popping up late, and Carlton just put the foot down and ran away with it. And I feel the tone was set for this game right from the get-go. We had the De Koning boys in Sam and Tom go head-to-head in the ruck. The moment the ball went down to Carlton's forward 50 and Tom De Koning wins that ruck contest and snags a goal early, I think that set the tone for the game. And Tom De Koning in the end ended up coming out in what I thought was his best game of the season. He's starting to string some really solid games together. He had 25 disposals for the game, which as a ruckman is a decent return. From that 25 disposals, he ran at 72% disposal efficiency. He had 400 meters gained. 18 of his 25 disposals were effective, with 20 of the 25 being contested, as well as 34 hitouts, 7 clearances, 4 marks, kicked 1 goal 1, 10 score involvements, and laid 6 tackles. Absolutely huge for a ruckman. This is a kid who started the year off a little bit shaky and shared the ruckload with Mark Pitnet, and as the season has gone on, Carlton, I think, have identified that he is stronger on his own as a solo ruckman, and I feel Carlton are going to be held in greater stead moving forward if Tom De Koning is a solo ruckman. I don't think he needs to share the load. I feel maybe just because of his age, they don't want to bear the brunt of a full game on just his shoulders, which I can fully understand that concept. But by far one of the best players on the field, and to the same retrospect, Sam De Koning had a pretty decent game as well. I mean, for Geelong, he had 20 disposals at 85% efficiency, 17 effective, 16 contested, 20 hitouts, 4 clearances of his own, took 1 mark, kicked a goal, 2 score involvements, but laid 5 tackles as well. So in and around the contest as a makeshift ruckman, because Sam de Koning is a premiership defender, and we're used to seeing his interceptability from the backline being his strong suit. But for whatever reason, we're not seeing Reece Stanley get any game time. We saw Toby Conway get game time but get injured. Mark Blixavs is a utilitarian in the way of being able to play anywhere on the ground, but they seem to be rather using him as a midfielder instead of a ruck option. So they've thrown kind of Sam de Koning out of his element, and I don't know how that's going to hold Geelong moving forward. But I feel where the game was won as well was the role that Alex Chincotta played on Tom Stewart. And it was a forward defensive role in which Chincotta was still able to stay accountable. I think if I look through the stats, Chincotta actually scored a goal or 2 for the game. So let me roll through and just get that up, shall we, while we roll through. But he was playing a hard lockdown role on Tom Stewart, who we have come to appreciate as one of the better defenders in the AFL for a very long time. He is going to have accolades that'll probably see him in the Hall of Fame when his time comes, just given how many times he's been thrown into the All-Australian team. Alex Chincotta kicked 2 goals for the game. He had 10 disposals, 4 score involvements, laid 7 tackles, and kept Tom Stewart rather quiet. Tom Stewart only had 15 disposals for the game. As far as marks go, he still took 5 marks, but I think he really had his influence taken out of the game. This is a player who loves to break away from the pack and be that player that kind of floats behind, gets the intercept marked and rebounds the ball. Chincotta made him accountable in every single contest, and there was many a time where you would usually see Stewart fly for a free ball, but that lockdown role that Chincotta was playing really took him out of his element. I really enjoyed seeing that role go down, so much so that when we talk about the next round recap with Carlton taking on Richmond, Chincotta does end up transitioning into that defensive role again, playing on Nick Vlosten. So it's going to be very interesting to see how he is used moving forward. It looks like they're going to start using him as not even as a forward decoy, because he's still finding ways to pop up and about, but they're going to put him on essentially the dangerous intercepting defender to try and take that intercept game out of the opposition's defensive structure, which I think is a great move by Michael Voss. This game, as I said, was pretty much done and dusted at 3/4 time. Carlton at that point were almost 30 odd points up. Geelong, we have known to get a late rally and, come back from the clutches of defeat. But to think for the final quarter, Carlton went from 12 goals 11 to 21 goals 12. They kicked 9 goals 1 in the final term against Geelong's 3 goals 1. It was an absolute avalanche, and some people could say it was junk time goals in the end because, they already had the win secured and everything else, but can't discredit Carlton where credit is due. They have came out and absolutely decimated a team who, for the majority of the start of the season, were considered as one of the best teams. We were talking about Sydney and we were talking about Geelong, and Geelong have fallen off the perch severely. I think is only going to get worse as time goes on, because Tom Hawkins has injured himself. He is going to be out for, I think, an extended period of time. He ended the game with only 3 disposals, didn't hit the scoreboard. Obviously he's getting a bit older, but still has been a key focus of their forward structure. So it's going to be now up to the young kids in Dempsey, in Oliver Henry. Jeremy Cameron's going to have to lift his game and probably play deeper forward than he has most recently, because we know Jeremy Cameron is one of those transitioning players that loves to move up and down the ground. It's again just still the same usual suspects for Geelong popping up and digging deep as hard as they can. Oliver Dempsey, Max Holmes, Brian Myers, Mitch Duncan. Even at his age, he's having a really good season, Mitch Duncan. Jai Clark had a really good game as a first-year rookie. But again, that conversation continues to be happened about Geelong not really having any players popping up out of the ordinary. When we talk about the players that are performing at the level, it's always the same names. And with Carlton, we can throw up probably the same names as well, don't get me wrong, but there's a few names each week that you can kind of throw in the mix that usually wouldn't be up there. This week, it was Tom de Koning standing tall. They also had Matt Kennedy, who is a strong player, but isn't always in that mix as being regarded as the best, but he was one of their best on the night. Elijah Hollins, first year at Carlton, one of their best again. Dangerfield returned in this match. I want to talk about Patrick Dangerfield, talking about better players. And he was given a one-match suspension for a tackle in which he had both arms of Sam Walsh pinned. The tackle was executed. Sam Walsh's head hit the ground. Some would argue Sam Walsh added to the impact by maybe making sure his head hit the ground, if that makes sense. Geelong went to the tribunal, fought it, overturned the outcome, and Dangerfield was right to play this past weekend. Very interesting prospect, considering I think everybody knew Dangerfield was going to get off, because there's a little bit of conjecture going around that some players are afforded more favourability over others. They ended up determining that while the arms were pinned and Sam Walsh's head did hit the ground, Dangerfield did everything reasonably responsible and made enough effort to lessen the blow by controlling the tackle because he had both arms pinned. I don't know, because you had a couple of weeks prior, Harley Reid tackled a player who hit the ground head first. He copped 2 weeks, but he had one arm free, so he was able to brace for the contact. Whereas Sam Walsh had both arms pinned and was driven forward in the contest. You could probably argue by momentum. I don't know. I think there is still a lot of grey area around this whole dangerous tackle bullshit that we've seen go down within the 2024 season. That was the only real issue that came out of the game, if we're talking about issues, any controversy. So we can happily now move on to who I believe were the best on ground come that particular night for the Hip and Shoulder MVP award, which, again, if you're new around here and you haven't seen one of my podcasts before, it is where I essentially do a 3-2-1 Brownlow vote system, discussing who I think were the 3 best players on the field, 3 votes going to best of field, 2 votes and 1 vote then subsequential after that. A few players are going to miss out along the way. This is an objective kind of, and subjective, I don't know how you want to take it. It's my personal opinion at the end of the day, so I am going to get things wrong. If you disagree, or if you even do agree, let me know in the comments down below how you feel. The 1 vote for me for this game I gave to Sam Walsh. 33 disposals, 63% disposal efficiency. He had 640 metres gained, 21 of the 33 obviously being effective. 12 of the 33 were contested. He is an outside ball dominator in the way of liking to get the spill ball and being that feeding player, so he's not always going to have incredibly high contested numbers. This week did reflect that. 9 clearances, 3 marks, 1 goal, 1 goal assist, 10 score involvements, and 5 tackles. My 2 votes this week could have easily been flipped between who I gave 2 and 3 to, but I gave 2 votes to Patrick Cripps. 41 disposals, 56% disposal efficiency, so he let himself down by foot and by hand. 498 metres gained, 18 contested out of the 41, with 23 of those 41 being effective. He had 4 hitouts for the game, 14 clearances, 8 score involvements, and laid the 5 tackles. And we've already ran his numbers, but I think the most influence on this game came from Tom de Koning, who I gave the 3 vote best on ground accolades to. To recap his numbers again, 25 disposals at 72% disposal efficiency, 348 metres gained. No, he had 400 metres gained, mind you. Sorry, I was looking at the wrong player. 18 effective disposals, 20 of which were contested, 34 hitouts, 7 clearances, 4 marks, 1 goal, 1 goal assist, 10 score involvements, and 6 tackles. It now leaves us moving forward with two teams on opposite sides of the spectrum. Carlton now shaping up probably to be one of the only contenders running against Sydney currently, who we could probably see raising the premiership come the end of the season. And Geelong went from a team who early on a lot of would have said had one hand on the cup already with the form and the run they were having, to now missing the 8 completely. And I don't think they will play finals this year with how they have been playing. Down at Adelaide Oval, we had Port Adelaide host Brisbane, and this game, again, very similar to the circumstances from the first game of the round, sees two teams on opposite sides of the spectrum. Port Adelaide have been given a very strong run with the fixturing when it comes to playing out of Adelaide Oval, which for a very long time has been regarded as a fortress. And speaking of fortresses, Brisbane, who have been synonymous with turning the Gabba into a fortress, had a very rocky start, including being at the Gabba, but have finally started to turn their season around and get their year back on track, looking like they could firm again as a top 4 threat. These two teams going head to head, they had a lot to gain and a lot to lose out of this game, especially with the top 8 at the moment, probably the top, probably 5th through the 8th, so there's probably 4 spots up to grabs, I think, really open to a number of teams. And wins and losses at this time of the year is incredibly crucial to make sure if you're one of those teams competing, you're getting an upper edge against those other teams. You don't want to fall behind the pack when other teams are rising. So both teams came into this game with equal amounts to gain and equal amounts to lose. And unfortunately, as much as you would have thought Port Adelaide were the favourites coming into this game playing at home, Brisbane dismantled them. It was game over at halftime. 7 goals down, and it did not ever look at that point like Port Adelaide had any answers to get any score generation at all. And they're playing against a team who statistically is running as the number 1 scoring team in the competition. It is crazy to think that Brisbane, who had such a slow start to the year, has turned their year around and ended up becoming as potent moving the ball forward as they have been. Eric Hipwood kicks 5 goals. Oscar McInerney kicks 3. Joe Danaher kicks 3. Bruce Revel and Logan Morris, 2 kids in their first years at the club, both kick 2. Hugh McCluggage kicks 2. Charlie Cameron kicks 2. Callum Archie kicks 1. Rayner gets on the board with 1. Zach Bailey kicks 1. It was the talls that started standing tall, and it's good to see Hipwood and Danaher find some consistency together in the same forward line, because let's face it, and let's be bluntly honest here, when it comes to Hipwood, he is hot and cold like water, and Danaher has that consistency about him where he'll still pop up and kick 2 to 3 each week. Hipwood has the possibility of going completely scoreless and goes missing weeks on end. And to see both of them come out firing in the same week, it's no wonder that Brisbane won as emphatically as they ended up winning. It was a midfield battle that was incredibly great to watch, because when you saw players like Dunkley and Neal go head to head with Butters and Rosé, the numbers around the contest were very similar between players. Dane Zorko running off of the halfback has been great for Brisbane this year. Defensively as well, Dan Houston and Kane Farrell, similar to roles that Dane Zorko plays for Brisbane, played the same role for Port. So the matchup itself was great to watch, but the scoreboard just got blown way out of proportion, and Brisbane were really just taking the piss after halftime. I really don't know what's going on with Port Adelaide's season, and I feel, now this is a personal opinion, so feel free to discuss it with me in the comment section down below. I feel Ken Hinkley has been afforded one too many opportunity at Port Adelaide, and had Ken Hinkley been coaching at any other club, to have the period of no success that he has had, I feel he would have been shown the door at many of another club by this period in time. Whereas the running joke now with myself is whenever Port Adelaide lose, and I did so again with this particular round, that David Koch has already gone and started drafting up a new contract to sign Ken Hinkley on for another 5 years. It's very, very hard to get my head around. This is a team that consistently over the last few years we've been seeing make prelim finals, but never take that next step to go to the grand final. And you'd think a coach that keeps taking him to the brink and keeps knocking on the door, but not being able to take him that next step, you'd think something's got to give at some point in time. They've got the personnel now to win. Probably the thing that screws them the most is their lack of forward structure, because when you look at this particular game, they had no Charlie Dixon. They brought Jeremy Finlayson back in. He comes in and kicks 1 goal for the game, so didn't have much influence forward of the ball at all. Todd Marshall only kicks the 1 goal. Mitch Georgiades becoming a bit of a revelation for them. He had 3 goals on the night. Ollie Lord kicked 2, so he's really starting to find his feet. But you can't expect a young kid like Ollie Lord, who has only played a handful of games, to be your focus point moving the ball forward in a team that should have senior players firing each and every week. They targeted these players for a reason. Jeremy Finlayson has shown he is more than capable of kicking a bag every week, but goes incredibly quiet. I don't know what it is for Port. They've come out and they've heavily recruited defensively by bringing in Zirk Thatcher, bringing in Radigalia, building this strong defensive core, when I feel they probably should be focusing on trying to develop the front half of their game. I think that's the one thing that's preventing them from taking the next step, because I feel Ivan Soldo is good enough to be number 1 ruck at that club when he's fit. You've got Jordan Sweet, who gets enough opportunity and has shown that he is capable at the level as well, but they're not premier ruckmans. That being said, teams have won premierships without having that premier ruckman. Oscar McInerney might not have won a premiership yet. He's not a premiership ruckman, but he has the capabilities of having big games like he had right here. Looking at Richmond, Toby Nankervis has never been considered a premier ruckman. He's now a 3-time premiership player. So they don't need to be of a Max Gawn, Brodie Grundy, Tim English caliber. They just need to find consistency, and I think that's where it falls down. Brisbane, on the other hand, they've just gone to a whole new gear. They've just shifted their whole game plan from the start of the season to this point in time. They were one of the worst forward half teams in the competition. They're now running at the best. Their rebound work from defensive 50 to forward 50 is absolutely insane. Their pressure around the contest, especially from their midfield core, is absolutely incredible. I infinitely loved what I saw from Brisbane this past week, and I think given the scope of how the ladder is shaping up, if they can have a top 4 finish, there's nothing stopping them from popping up in the grand final again this year. Turning my attention to best on ground, we do have another clean sweep when it comes to the players I've picked, because as much as I would have loved to have mentioned Connor Rozee or Zach Butters, which I will rattle their numbers off now, Rozee had 28 disposals at 82% disposal efficiency, 373 metres gained, 8 contested, with 1 clearance, 8 marks, 9 score involvements, and 7 tackles. Zach Butters had 35 disposals running at 74%, 486 metres gained, 12 contested, 8 clearances, 6 marks, 1 goal, 13 score involvements, and 6 tackles. Both could have probably been in the mix for that 1 vote kind of marker, but given that they lost by 13 goals, I've got to give credit where it's due to the players that I feel had a much larger influence, which is what I always do when I hand my votes out. The 1 vote I'm giving to Eric Hipwood, and some people might be saying he deserves a lot more given the fact that he kicked 5 goals for the game, but when you hear the numbers from the other players that I'm going to name, there's no surprise as to where the 2 and the 3 vote went. But Eric Hipwood had 16 disposals at 68% disposal efficiency, 391 metres gained, 4 contested of those 16, took 10 marks, kicked 5 goals, 1, had the 9 score involvements, and laid 2 tackles. The 2 vote for me for this game goes to Josh Dunkley, who I feel is having a season that has been incredibly underrated, and I feel he doesn't get spoken enough in circles, you know, especially given the influence he does have on the contest. 32 disposals at 62%, 275 metres gained, 17 of the 32 were contested, 3 clearances, 6 marks, 1 goal assist, 6 score involvements, and laid 7 tackles for the game. And best on ground, may as well been probably player of the round, close enough to it, was Lachie Neale. 37 disposals, 89% disposal efficiency, 352 metres gained, 18 of the 37 were contested, 10 clearances, 7 marks, 2 goals, 11 score involvements, and 6 tackles. I apologise for getting a little bit croaky-throated. I think there's a frog in there and he's teabagging my tonsils. It's not a good feeling. We saw a replay of the Battle of the Bridge with Sydney and GWS going head-to-head at NG Stadium in a game that was very close at quarter time, and then the floodgates opened and Sydney just went to town. A game that was 40 points the difference in the way of Sydney at halftime, and even though GWS clawed it back a little bit in the end, again, Sydney just pressing their dominance and showcasing why they have been the best team in the competition this year. Up until this point in time, still only defeated by Richmond, and I am happy to hang my hat on that fact for as long as I can. As long as I can. For all their dominance throughout the game, and it was just an absolute showcase from Sydney in this game, they did take their foot off the pedal and allowed GWS to come back with a 5-goal swing in that final quarter, which stemmed the flow of that margin quite severely. But this is a team that I think didn't fall into complacency. You know, they might have eased a little bit, but they have still been playing far and beyond the best brand of football that we have seen all year. And up against a GWS team that have really fallen from grace. This was a team who I genuinely thought would be a top 4 threat this year, and they started the season in that kind of retrospect, but they've fallen off so severely, and there are many media experts and journalists now having their 2 cents worth with the fact that the drop-off from GWS is going to be the worst drop-off to watch this season, given how star-studded this team is. I don't think they're hampered currently too much by injury at all, whereas on the flip side, we're still looking at a Sydney squad who can improve. They've got players on the outer that can still come back in. I don't know how much longer Luke Parker has to serve on his suspension from state level, but Luke Parker comes back in and makes a genuine impact, I feel. They've played the season without their captain in Callum Mills, who I feel would elevate them again to another level. Which role he would play, I'm not entirely sure, because, and the same with Luke Parker. We've seen these 2 players star in that midfield group, but this year it's been all about the main 3, Isaac Heaney, Errol Goulden, Chad Warner. And I argue anybody to tell me a better core 3 right now in the competition. As a duo, you could probably argue maybe Patrick Cripps and Sam Walsh may be better than, say, Warner and Heaney, especially going off of form most recently. But overall, I still feel Heaney has been the best player in the competition. I think he's still going to be leading the Brownlow at this point in time. It's going to be a very close race home, and I'm not discrediting GWS at all for this loss. I mean, it was a loss that's going to hurt them, but they had players again that really elevated to the level. Tom Green finally found a little bit of form back into his game in this particular matchup. He had 35 disposals at 71% efficiency, 431 metres gained, 15 contested of the 35, 4 clearances, 8 marks, 3 score involvements, 5 tackles. Finn Callahan has been a revelation for GWS this year, I feel. 27 disposals, 74% efficiency, 10 contested, 578 metres gained, 6 clearances, 4 marks, 2 goal assists, 6 score involvements, 4 tackles. You know, Lachie Whitfield, again, I still argue is in career best form, in my eyes anyway. 25 disposals at 80%, over 500 metres gained, took 8 defensive marks. Josh Kelly has slopped back into the system quite well, but he was down with only 23 disposals at 56%. And then the drop-off after that is kind of alarming. And there's a lot of players that are usually good ball users that had some down days for GWS this particular week, and that shows and reflects on the scoreboard. Unfortunately, I don't know where the drop-off has happened with GWS. It's one of those things where we turn attention to the ladder, and we'll do that at the end of the podcast before we wrap things up. They're one of those teams that I feel are a real threat of missing the 8 when their list is so deserving of being recognized as top 4 in the competition. It's so frustrating, I think, at least, to see a team, and you could argue has been afforded many opportunities in the way of extra draft picks when they came into the comp and concessions and things like that. They've built such an incredible team. They've got players who are now not wanting to leave to go elsewhere because they believe in the systems that Kingsley has in place at GWS, and they've just started to really have a severe fall from grace. I don't know what it is. You know, it's hard to get my head around. It's just 2 teams. Again, I feel this round has been 2 teams on opposite sides of the spectrum. One team comes out absolutely dominant, and the other team that we expect so much of have fallen short of the mark. And that's exactly how it has played out in the first 3 games of this particular round. The 3-2-1, again, clean sweeping. Sydney are going to take all the votes here. But I'm going to rattle off a couple of Sydney names here that could have been in the mix, but I feel didn't have as much impact as we're used to seeing them have, especially this particular season. Isaac Heaney, as I mentioned, 23 disposals, 69% efficiency. Hey. 356 metres gained, 15 contested of the 23. 10 clearances, 1 mark. Only the 1 behind for the game. 6 score involvements, but laid 7 tackles. Nick Blakey, 22 disposals at 77%. 651 metres gained. 6 of the 22 were contested. 4 marks, 1 goal assist, 2 score involvements, and 2 tackles, with Chad Warner being a bit down on output as well. Still had influence, but didn't get much of the ball. He had 20 disposals, but only ran at 45% disposal efficiency. 8 of the 20 were contested, 5 clearances, 3 marks, still jagged 2 goals won, with 5 score involvements and 5 tackles. The votes, however, this week, the 1 vote goes to Brodie Grundy, who I thought had a huge game in the ruck. 28 disposals, down on efficiency with 53%, but he had 13 of the 28 contested, 31 hitouts, 4 clearances, 2 marks, 1 goal assist, 7 score involvements, and 5 tackles for the game. The 2 vote this week goes to James Rowbottom, a player who I feel, again, doesn't get enough credit where it is due. He is an absolute pressure machine, and if I could steal anybody as an underrated player from a club, James Rowbottom would be on my list 100%. 32 disposals at 71%, 20 of those 32 were contested, 448 metres gained, 11 clearances, 2 marks, 2 goal assists, 10 score involvements, and laid 6 tackles for the game. Best on ground, and was judged so by winning the Brett Kirk medal, was Errol Goulden. 41 disposals, did only run at 58% disposal efficiency, so our usual suspects in Grundy, Goulden, Heaney, Warner, all running at an incredibly low disposal efficiency compared to what we have seen them run at. But of his 41, 12 were contested. He got a lot of uncontested ball. 2 clearances, but he did take 12 marks, kicked 1 goal won, 2 goal assists, 7 score involvements, but didn't lay a tackle. So he had plenty of the ball. 973 metres gained, mind you, is huge. Melbourne versus North Melbourne at the MCG. You would have been probably safe to assume that given the score line at quarter time, Melbourne were going to win this game by 60 plus points. And North Melbourne, just as they have in recent weeks, found a way to just remain competitive to the final siren, and they ended up losing this game by 3 points. It's a real retrospective look at North Melbourne, and there are a lot of people that are saying, and when I say people, I say journalists, media experts, those type of people that are experienced heads within the AFL world, have all been saying that North Melbourne have been playing a brand of football that people should be getting very excited about and be very proud of. They might not be getting the 4 points and the win on the board, but they're playing watchable football. They're playing a good brand. They're getting their hands on it. Their movement of the ball is great. They're just missing that final piece that connects everything together. But this was a game, again, I was watching it, and at halftime I thought, yeah, there's no point watching this moving forward. It's done and dusted. Let's just forget about it. And then again, just as they have, as I just said, in recent weeks, they just dug deep. They found a way to stay in the contest. They came out in the second half a completely different team, and I found myself as a neutral supporter getting excited when that kind of momentum shift happened and North Melbourne started rallying with all those goals. And as a neutral supporter that has no investment in a football game but just wants to watch it for the love of the game, the ability to be drawn into supporting a team that you don't support, I feel, is incredibly rare. And when that connection is made, you know you're watching something special. And that is what North Melbourne truly did to me this past week. Well, this particular week anyway, given the fact that this one's a week late. It was definitely an interesting watch. It was hard to watch, given Luke Davies-Uniacke was only probably centimetres away from marking a ball that could have potentially seen him kick a match winner. There was opportunities that went begging late. You could argue a little bit of controversy again at the end here that may have cost North Melbourne the game. I'm not going to really get too much into conjecture when it comes to stuff like that. You know, we've been talking about the umpiring and the inconsistency of the umpiring for a long period of time this year. I've come in with a mindset this week that I don't want to really talk about the umpiring unless I have to. Otherwise, we're going to be here forever. We could do a completely separate video talking about the state of the umpiring. I can tell you that right now. It was an interesting watch for this particular game because it was the first outing that Melbourne had without Christian Petrarca. And we know Christian Petrarca is out for the rest of the year, severely injured. It was at one point being discussed that maybe he would never play football again. That's how bad the injury was. And we know Clayton Oliver has had a very off year, incredibly inconsistent. His off-field antics, if you want to call them antics, pre-season has kind of landed him in hot water, and I feel has maybe taken over a little bit mentally, which has caused him to underperform. And they've got a forward structure that has failed to deliver yet again. Let's turn our attention to that forward structure, shall we? So we can just have a look here. They kicked 11 goals for the game, Melbourne. Daniel Turner, first-year player, I do believe, he kicked 2 of those 11. Jacob Van Rooyen kicked 1 goal. Tom Sparrow kicked 1 goal. Trent Rivers kicked 1 goal. Keziah Pickett kicked 1 goal. Harrison Petty kicked 1 goal. Alex Neil-Bullen, 1 goal. Tom McDonald, 1 goal. Max Gawn, 1 goal. Cade Chandler, 1 goal. What's missing here? Well, Harrison Petty's been played as a key forward. He only has 1 goal for the game. Who else is missing here, you wonder? Well, let's go down the list, shall we? Let's fucking work that out. Bailey Fritsch doesn't score for the game. And this is a player who a lot of people were saying at one point or another should be within All-Australian conversation. The drop-off with Fritsch has been severe this year. I cannot understate that at all. When you've got young, talented kids on this list who should have strong, relevant senior heads around them, you'd think that this would be a forward structure that could get momentum going, get the gears grinding. Unfortunately, it doesn't happen enough. You know, Harrison Petty has 11 disposals at 36% efficiency. Keziah Pickett has 10, but only runs at 50% efficiency. Tom McDonald kicks a goal, but for the most part, Tom McDonald's been playing as a backman. So I can't really wrap my head kind of around that justification. Bailey Fritsch has 6 disposals for the entire game. It's just, I don't know. It's just so hard to kind of sink your teeth into and wrap your head around. And on the flip side, Cam Zurhaar gets off the chain. He kicks 4. Harry Sheasel, who has moved into a midfield role, he kicks 2. Eddie Ford kicks 2. Jai Simpkin kicks a goal. Davies Uniacke finds a way to kick a goal. It's just... and the disposal efficiency probably overall was probably down in this game. Very scrappy given it was at the MCG. I can't remember if it was raining or not in this particular night game, but the disposal efficiency would probably indicate that maybe it was a little bit wet out there. I don't know. Again, it was a game where I felt probably North Melbourne were a little bit hard done by and should have won, and I really would have loved to have seen them won. They've played a few games this year where they've just fell short, and I felt so gutted for them that they haven't walked away with a win. And again, it is that connection that they've been able to make because they've been playing great football that I think is dragging people in, and I think maybe garnering a little bit of that sympathy. I don't know. There really isn't much to report about this game, really, and I don't want to dwell on it any more than I have to, so let's lock in our 3-2-1. It was pretty straightforward this week for me anyway. A close contest, so you could throw the ball up with many players, I think, on the field. But the 3 I went for, I think, individually had some pretty big games in their own right. So, again, open to opinion, so feel free to tell me if I'm right or wrong. Comment section, let's have a discussion about it. The 1 vote I gave to Jack Viney, 25 disposals at 44%. Again, this is what I'm saying. These are players that we're used to seeing not be so exquisite with the ball that it's off the charts, but we're expecting a lot more than 44% from Jack Viney when he's running with the ball. 416 metres gained, 19 of the 25 were contested, 12 clearances, 3 marks, 1 goal assist, 5 score involvements, and 6 tackles for the game. I would also just like to point out that that could have very well been George Wardlaw, who had 23 at 69% with 15 contested, 7 clearances, 4 score involvements, and 8 tackles. I just feel Jack Viney was more comprehensive for Melbourne in this game when they needed him to be, compared to what Wardlaw was. The 2 votes to me is being handed to Harry Sheasel, who is having a very great year, respectively as well. 27 disposals at 63%, 10 of those are contested, 624 metres gained, 3 clearances, 7 marks, 2 goals straight with 3 score involvements and 2 tackles on the day. And best on ground for me was Luke Davies-Uniacke, who is having a hell of a year. 31 disposals, 17 contested, running at 83% disposal efficiency, 429 metres gained, 8 clearances, 4 marks, 1 goal, 7 score involvements and 3 tackles on the day. Essendon versus West Coast at Marvel Stadium. We have seen this match play out earlier in the year where it was defined by less than a kick, and we knew the replay was going to be a great contest. And at halftime, it probably looked like Essendon were about to start kicking away in a big way. 3/4 time, West Coast were well in the hunt and we had a game on our hands, but in the end, Essendon were too strong and they managed to secure a 30-point win. However, that's to no discredit to West Coast, because West Coast still managed to kick 13 goals, 14 for the game. They had opportunities that went begging. Could probably blame themselves for inefficiency in front of goal letting them down this particular week. But again, a West Coast game where I was truly invested in West Coast playing as a neutral. And you wouldn't expect, I think, because we've seen how West Coast have performed in recent years, coming into a game this year prior to that kind of streak where we had a patch of purple patch where they went absolutely bananas and they started winning games, we probably wouldn't expect West Coast to be winning games or be as competitive as they have been in recent months. So being treated to what could be is incredibly tantalizing, in my eyes anyway. You know, they lose this game by 30 points, but there's a lot that they take away from it. That being argued, and I still raise the point here with Essendon currently sitting in the top 4, but I question whether or not they have been truly challenged up until this point in time. We know fixturing wise, they only travelled once out of Melbourne for the rest of the year, and that is the final game of the round against Brisbane, or at the end of the season rather, not the end of the round, but the final game of the season will be played at the Gabba. They play in Melbourne every other game. They've only won a game and a half against current top 8 teams. So when it comes to playing contenders, they struggle. Very interesting boat to be in. I try to have this discussion sometimes. I feel it falls on deaf ears at times. But it's a hard boat to be sitting in because Essendon have been playing a good brand of football. It's just the way that the year has kind of been structured for particular teams. They've had a very soft draw, I feel, that allows for this kind of shift. I don't know. Feel free to tell me in the comments down below. I'll probably pose it as the question of the day. How do you think Essendon's year has been so far? Do you think they have benefited from a softer draw? Do you think they are a genuine threat when it comes to finals? Let's have a discussion about it in the comments down below. As far as the actual players on the day go, I think the glaring point that we are staring down the barrel of here is the fact that when you look at the top 10 performing players on the day, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 of the 10 are all from Essendon. To further compact that, in the top 20, they take almost 3/4 of the top 20 performing players. And then the drop off after that is quite severe. There was a number of players that had very little influence, could barely get their hands on the ball, that we're used to seeing more from, but failed to deliver. Nate Caddy for Essendon was a great watch. He was a late inclusion for Todd Goldstein. Hadn't kicked a goal before this game at the level, but kicked 2 goals, 1. I thought that was great to see him get up and about. Unfortunately, as we will discuss in the next round recap podcast for round 16, he does get dropped out of the team, and I think that was incredibly rough given how well he played, given the opportunity he was given. Very hard to start working out votes when it comes to Essendon games, because again, we've been talking in this podcast about teams that have the usual suspects popping up, but Essendon have had a year where comprehensively there is always a handful of players that nobody really ever talks about that starts really getting involved in the conversation. This player absolutely breaks my heart because he was in Richmond's grasp and we should have taken him and we didn't do it. But Sam Durham, who was in Richmond's VFL system, I wish Richmond had taken him in the mid-season draft ahead of Essendon. I really do, because he's been one hell of a revelation for Essendon this year. Jai Caldwell has really found his footing in this team. Nick Martin keeps going from strength to strength at full back. Jake Stringer, in a contract year, is having a brilliant year. Dyson Heppel is finding consistency off the halfback flank. Xavier Dersma's finding his footing. Sam Draper is starting to re-establish himself. Archie Perkins still having a season where he's up and down, but he had enough of the ball in this game to be competitive. Ridley has slot back like he hasn't missed a beat. Redmond's still doing Redmond things. Laverde played out of his skin in this game. You know, there was such a big list of players for Essendon that just outperformed a West Coast outfit quite severely, because outside of Elliot Yeo and Jeremy McGovern, maybe including Liam Duggan in the conversation, the drop-off is huge, and it goes well beyond saying they didn't have Harley Reid, because let's face it, they haven't had Harley Reid for years and they have struggled. So this was starting to reveal a little bit of a glaring issue for West Coast, because it is always the same players popping up. They need to have some players kind of break out in a sense and really start taking the game by the horns. Apart from that, there's not really much to really talk about, so I'm just going to jump into the votes for this game. Again, I was invested in this game right until the final siren. Made even better with some banter with some mates that go for Essendon, West Coast and everything else, so it was great to sit back as a neutral and take in another great game of football. This one is a clean sweep for Essendon, given, as I just pointed out, the glaring disparity between the amount of Essendon players that performed and the lack of West Coast players that really stood tall. The players that I want to mention that are probably stiff to miss this particular week, we do have Jai Caldwell, who misses the votes this week. He had 27 disposals at 66%, 9 contested at 525 metres gained, 6 clearances, 6 marks, 1 goal, 8 score involvements, and 11 tackles on the day. Elliot Yeo, honourable mention, 20 disposals with 13 tackles was absolutely huge for West Coast. But again, outside of that, nobody really offering him any assistance whatsoever. Jaden Laverde, I was going to say Jordan Laverde because I was looking at Jordan Ridley. Jaden Laverde had a 28 disposal game at 96% disposal efficiency, 11 marks and 5 tackles, so he was huge out of defense. And Jordan Ridley had 25 disposals at 84%, 7 marks. He has really just slot back into their system so incredibly well, and people were stupid to think that he would not return in the form that he had prior to injuring himself. This kid is an absolute weapon. The votes this week, however, did go to Jake Stringer in the 1 vote slot. 20 disposals at 65% disposal efficiency, 8 contested at 494 metres gained, 5 clearances, 10 marks, 5 goals, 1 goal assist, 10 score involvements, and 1 tackle on the day. Again, Jake Stringer was just eating everything that came his way, kicking every opportunity he had, and really boosting the possibility of either getting re-signed or maybe landing somebody else on a very tasty contract. Because again, out of contract this year and doing everything to make sure the next one he gets is very tasty. The 2 votes this week goes to Zach Merritt. 28 disposals at 89% disposal efficiency, 6 contested at 486 metres gained, only had 2 clearances, which is really down for Zach, but he had 8 marks, 1 goal, 5 goal assists, 13 score involvements, and 2 tackles. He was just in everything when it came to feeding his teammates around him and hitting the scoreboard. I really love the year he is having. I still feel he is making a very strong case for All-Australian captain and could still very well be a Brownlow Smoky. Best on ground, I mentioned his name earlier, Sam Durham had some game. 29 disposals, 69% disposal efficiency, so he was down on that. 13 contested, however, with 521 metres gained. 5 clearances, 3 marks, 1 goal, 8 score involvements, laid the 2 tackles. You could probably make an argument that maybe Zach Merritt did have the better game here, but it was just a lot of talk when Sam Durham got the ball, and his use of the ball, I just feel, had bigger, more influential moments to stand tall and really secure him that 3 vote. But you could flip a coin for Merritt and Durham, I feel, for the 3 and the 2 here. The final game of the round was at Optus Stadium with Fremantle hosting Gold Coast in a game that looked dead in the water at 3/4 time, and with the Gold Coast clawing their way back, gave themselves a glimmer of hope, but in the end, Fremantle walk away with a 20-point victory. Again, picking up a win on a very up and down roller coaster style season. They win one week, they drop one week, and in a season that sees so many teams still fighting for position in that top 8, they can't afford to be seesawing as much as they are. And on the same token, the Gold Coast Suns are still well and truly in the hunt, but can they find enough sustainability and consistency to get their season back on track? They had opportunity here, Fremantle, to go absolutely bananas and secure a big win. And again, given the scope at how open this top 8 currently is, percentage could end up playing factor, especially with some teams that have had some buys. It's going to be very interesting to see how the top 8 falls. But this particular game, scrappy in parts, I feel. It was a weird day for scoring, actually, because to think out of the 12 goals Fremantle kicked, Hayden Young kicked 3. Josh Tracy kicked 2. We've come to see him probably become the more dominant forward presence for Fremantle this year. Sam Sturt kicked 2, which is great to see him starting to step up. Sarong and O'Meara both hit the board with a goal each. Frederick kicks a goal. Sean Darcy gets involved. Brayshaw gets involved. So they kicked a big score without the likes of Sam Switkowski popping up and scoring, without the likes of Luke Jackson going forward and scoring, without the likes of Jaya Miss hitting the scoreboard as well. Jaya Miss had a very down game as well, only 6 disposals at 50%. On the flip side for the Gold Coast, Sam Day really starting to assert himself, but I think his age might be coming into factor. I think he's in his 30s, so it'd be interesting to see what happens with Sam Day. David Swallow kicked a couple, Jack Lukosius kicked a couple, Ben Long kicked the 1, Brandon Ellis kicked 1. But again, some usual suspects that you would think would hit the scoreboard, like Bailey Humphrey, didn't kick a score, only had the 4 disposals for the game at 50%. Not sure whether he was sub or not, so that'll be interesting. I didn't really check that. But to see him not hit the scoreboard was definitely interesting. Ben Ainsworth not hitting the scoreboard was questionable as well. So really starting to see some players from both teams here kind of drop off in form, and you don't want to be dropping off at this point of the year when the season is well and truly open for the taking. Both teams are well and truly still in the hunt. I still personally feel Fremantle could shape as being a dark horse in the finals, in retrospect to a team that can do damage that not many people would expect that damage to come from. The Gold Coast, I don't know where they're at. I really thought at the start of the year they were going to be a finals contending team, but they've kind of dropped off the mark a bit. But again, they're very much like what Fremantle have been. Drop one week and then win another week. So there's still question marks, I think, about both of these clubs. I would probably think Fremantle have shown me more this year overall to be more of a better selection for top 8. I think I have a little bit more confidence in saying Fremantle will play finals this year over Gold Coast playing finals this year. But I'd think at this point in time, with how Gold Coast have been performing, they get Hardwick in. He's made the call about them winning a premiership within X amount of years. Is there going to be egg on their face if they miss the top 8 completely? And how much more can the Gold Coast supporters take if that is well and truly going to be the case? Again, it wasn't really a game that had anything exciting go down. It wasn't really an exhilarating game to watch. There wasn't anything that really popped out to me and screamed, I have to talk about this when it comes to the podcast, or we need to tweet about this. So, again, I'm just happy to dive straight into the votes here. Do my 3, 2, 1, and we'll wrap this bitch up, shall we? So, this is another Fremantle-bound voting system. However, I will give some honourable mentions where they are particularly due. Touk Miller had 33 disposals at 54%. Not used to seeing him so down on disposal efficiency. Only had 8 contested for 715 metres gained. 1 clearance as well is really down for Miller. 8 marks, 4 score involvements, and laid 6 tackles. So he made up for his lack of clearances with his defensive pressure around the ground. Sam Flanders also had 33. He ran at 84%. 11 contested at 339 metres gained. 4 clearances, 7 marks, 5 score involvements, and 3 tackles. Matt Rowell had 23 at 60% with the 10 clearances and 7 tackles. Noah Anderson had 23 disposals at 73%, 9 contested, 4 clearances, 6 score involvements, but only 2 tackles, so his defensive pressure was a little bit down as well. The 3 players that I have plucked out for the votes this week, the 1 vote I'm giving to Caleb Sarong. 29 disposals at 65%, 14 of the 29 were contested with 430 metres gained, 7 clearances, 3 marks, 1 goal assist, 7 score involvements, and 2 tackles. The 2 vote goes to Andrew Brayshaw. 32 disposals at 68%, 14 contested at 390 metres gained, 7 clearances, 5 tackles, 1 goal, 1 goal assist, 10 score involvements, and a game high 8 tackles. And Hayden Young got the 3 for me. 24 disposals at 87% disposal efficiency, 8 contested at 377 metres gained, 4 clearances, 4 marks, 3 goals straight, 12 score involvements, and 3 tackles on the day. So after 15 rounds of football, this is how the ladder is shaping up. Our top 4 is Sydney, still 3 games clear ahead of Carlton, Essendon, and Collingwood. Fremantle, GWS, Geelong, and Port Adelaide round out the top 8, with Melbourne out of the top 8 in 9th spot by 0.6%. It is close. Brisbane, Bulldogs, Gold Coast, Hawthorn, and St Kilda round out the next bunch of teams, with our bottom 4 being Adelaide, West Coast, Richmond, and North Melbourne. With the round officially recapped, there is only one thing left for us to do, and that is to turn our attention to the Hip and Shoulder MVP award for the 2024 season. And as I did last week, we're going to have a look at how the top 10 stands. Looking over the votes this week that I have been giving, there are some players that I think I'm now starting to realize that I've probably been sleeping on a little bit and are having bigger years than I have identified. So again, it opens up conjecture for you guys to point it out to me in the comment section down below. But in 10th place, on 12 votes respectively, we have Jordan Dawson, Chad Warner, Max Gawn, and Jack Steele. In 9th place, on 13 votes, we have Patrick Cripps, who is definitely a player I feel I have been sleeping on, Matt Rowell, Zach Butters, and Tom Green. In 8th place, on 14 votes, we have Sam Walsh and Isaac Rankin. In 7th place, with 15 votes, we have Errol Goulden. And in 6th place, on 17 votes, we have the teammates in Marcus Bontempelli and Adam Treloar. Our top 5 is as follows, and for the first time in a while, we have a definitive top 5 without any ties in any location. In 5th place, on 18 votes, we have Lockie Neal. In 4th place, with 20 votes, we have Caleb Sarong. In 3rd place, on 23 votes, we have Nick Dacos. On 25 votes, in 2nd place, we have Zach Merritt. And in 1st place, despite not getting a vote this week, we still have Isaac Heaney with 30 votes. I definitely feel the Brownlow is going to be a hell of a lot different now. In retrospect to that, I definitely feel Dacos, Merritt, Heaney, Sarong, Neal, Bontempelli will all be up and truly there to compete. I think Patrick Cripps at this point in time has a hell of a lot more than 13 votes, and I might have been sleeping on him a little bit. So Carlton fans, I do apologise for that. But again, this is all opinion based, and it opens up point of discussion with myself and yourself to have a discussion in the comment section down below, to discuss on social media. So please do take advantage of that. I love reading the comments you guys leave, especially if they do involve kicking about some conjecture, some discussion points. So let it rip, whatever the case may be. Let's have a conversation about it. But that is it for this video. Thank you for joining me, albeit a bit late. I do apologize. In the next 48 hours, you will get the round recap for round 16. So this will drop Monday night. So I'm hoping by Wednesday night, if not Thursday morning, the round recap podcast for round 16 will drop, and then by Thursday night, my tips for round 17 will drop as well. I'm just a little bit upset that we don't have Thursday night football for the rest of the year. Please tell me I'm not the only one. Please, just really tell me I'm not the only one. Thursday night football should be a permanent fixture moving forward, and I would even argue that Monday night football, we should even get that as well. Let's go Thursday to Monday. Let's just get as much football as we can. I love watching the game, and I'm all for as much football as we can possibly get. I was against Thursday night football originally, but let's keep it as a permanent fixture every round. Let's fucking do it. Thursday night, let's make it happen. Thank you for joining me. Do hit that like button down below if you do enjoy what I'm doing and you just want to show your appreciation. And if you haven't yet, as I said at the top of the video, hit that subscribe button. Get on board the community we are building here. But that's it from me, guys. I'm out of here, and as always, I will catch you guys next time.